Hello, this is Kyle Mernon, Director of Online Learning here at Hillsdale College, and I'm excited to announce that we've brought Hillsdale's popular and free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. And we're starting with one of my favorites, The Second World Wars, a course taught by Victor Davis Hanson and Hillsdale President Larry P. Arnn. After listening to all 8 episodes, you'll have a clear picture of why the war was fought and how the Allied powers ultimately triumphed. The Hillsdale College Online Courses podcast, which I co-host with my colleague here, Juan Davalos, pursues Hillsdale's mission to provide all who wish to learn the education necessary to preserve the civil and religious liberties of America. And we want you to be a part of it at podcast.hillsdale.edu. Subscribe now to the Hillsdale College Online Courses podcast to hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. We're joined by Jenny Mulvey. She is an elementary school teacher, science lead at Golden View Classical Academy in Golden, Colorado, and also a master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 Education. Jenny, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
As we start, tell us a little about yourself and exactly what you do at Golden View.
Yeah, so I have just finished my 5th year of teaching at Golden View. I am one of the 4th grade teachers, and I also serve as the science lead, which means that I get to help support all of the other elementary school teachers in anything relating to science instruction. So anything from helping them prepare for any science experiments or labs that they're doing to helping find those sorts of experiments, lesson planning, really anything that they need in particular in their area of teaching science. I'm there to help. So
some years at Golden View. What was your journey like to becoming a teacher? Was that always something that was of interest to you for a potential career?
Yeah, my earliest memories of wanting to be a teacher was, I think back when I was in kindergarten. I was that kid that would make my younger siblings play school with me, where I'd be the teacher and teach them whatever I had learned at kindergarten that day, even though my little sibling was far too young to really understand that. But I've always loved learning, and I've loved helping other people to learn. And I think a lot of inspiration was my mom was a teacher. She has her master's in elementary ed. And so kind of through her example, she homeschooled us for our elementary school years, and just watching her teach, watching her passion for teaching really kind of inspired and formed me in that way. And then I went to a classical Christian high school, middle through high school. And I think that also was very formative because it allowed me to see in kind of a different way other people also having that same passion that my mom did. So, I grew up receiving the same kind of classical education that our students do in our school. I grew up with the E.D. Hirsch kind of base curriculum. But then I went to my classical high school and I saw the other teachers there that were so passionate about what they did, and they loved to share what they did with each other. And it was just something very different. I'd become aware of other peers of mine at other schools, and I could tell that there was something just different about this whole kind of classical school business. And I really loved the care that my teachers gave to me and to the things that they were teaching. And so that was kind of the point where I knew that when I became a teacher, I wanted to teach in a classical school. This was the way that I wanted to go about teaching. So then when I was in college, one of my majors was elementary education. And so that kind of really highlighted that difference for me between classical schools and kind of other public school models. And, it was a very formative and great experience to go through that education prep program. I had amazing mentor teachers that really helped me learn how to lesson plan and how to deliver content in front of students and get them to actually listen to me and help them learn. But, there was there was something about that, the cultures of the schools that was just different than the classical schools. And so when I was getting ready to start finding a place to teach myself, that's when I came across the Hillsdale schools and have been at Golden View ever since.
What would you say is the common thread between what you observed in your teachers as a student at a classical school and what you've experienced now being a part of that teaching cohort at a classical school?
Yeah, I think classical teachers, and I think this is just something that the liberal education really fosters in you, is an understanding that education isn't designed just to help you get some kind of job at the end. Education is essential in your human formation and your human happiness. You know, we talk a lot in our schools about how what we're teaching is not just for our kids to learn a skill, to get a job, that it doesn't matter what job you have, everyone should read these great texts. Everyone needs to have an understanding of science, because with that, you get a picture of understanding how the world that all of us live in works. Everyone lives in the same world, and we should all have an understanding of how it works. And, you know, the questions that these great works of literature that we read, these ideas that they discuss, are ones that pertain to what makes for true human happiness. What is it that makes George Washington such a great leader? There's something to him. You know, we study with our fourth graders how at Valley Forge, the soldiers are documented to have looked at Washington like a father. Why is that? What was about his character that made him such a good leader? There's something there that we can all learn from to become better leaders, no matter what profession we have. There's something about the character of Pollyanna that we read, who, despite having all of this tragedy befall her, she is still such a joyful character. And her aunt, who had the exact same problems befall her, has turned so bitter. Mm-hmm. All of us are going to be faced with challenges in our lives. How can we grow to become like the joyful, delightful Pollyanna and not turn into this hardened, bitter person like Aunt Polly that no one wants to be around? These are questions that all people should know how to answer. And we can only answer those questions by being exposed to all the different disciplines in the liberal arts that we study. And I think that's something that teachers at classical schools recognize. And so it's not only something that they focus on with their students, it's something that they focus on with each other. In my high school, they talked about both the faculty and the students being a community of learners. And in high school, I always thought that was such kind of a kitschy term. And I kind of would always laugh like, oh yeah, community of learners. But the faculty actually were. I would see them, on an off period, chatting with each other in the hallways about a book that one of them was reading that they were really passionate about. It wasn't just something that they said, it was something that they lived and that they did. And I think, having been in different classical schools now, it's something that I really see seems to be a really common thread across all classical schools. So
how does that happen? How do you set and maintain the type of culture that you've explained?
I think a really big part is it has to start with the school leaders, with the mission and vision of the school. A lot of our classical schools in the Hillsdale network have kind of a similar mission and vision. They all have something to do with there being a focus on character formation. There's a focus on teaching all of the liberal arts and sciences, K through 12. There's a focus on a Socratic style of teaching. And it's very unique. I think if classical is all that you've known, you kind of just assume that that's the way that all schools are, and it really isn't. And I think that it's something very important for the school leaders to highlight. And when they're looking for faculty to be part of that school, to make sure that's really clear so that, if a teacher's coming in, they know that that's kind of what they're signing up for. And that's something that they actually really believe and are really passionate about. And then that kind of attracts the kind of people that are going to help foster that community. So that kind of, first of all, gets people in the door. But then even when you have these really excellent people that are really passionate about forming and teaching their students, as a first year teacher, I was really eager, but I wasn't fully equipped in knowing exactly how to put those ideas into practice. There's so many practical ways that you can go about having those kind of character formation discussions. There's so many great ways to have a really excellent math lesson where you're really having the students get to really grapple through and think through how to solve a problem without you just telling them. And the only way to really learn how to do that is by having mentor teachers that will help take those new faculty and show them how it's done. So our school had a lot of really great things in place, and as we've grown, we've added more kind of mentorship relationships to help form teachers. So, when I started off, we had a grade level lead teacher who, we had one for 3rd and 4th grade, and she would go into all of our classrooms all the time, and she would observe us, and she would give us feedback, and she'd point out things that we could improve on, and also things that we were doing well that maybe we didn't realize we were doing, but that were really excellent. Then we could lean into those more. I was blessed with having just one of the most phenomenal co-teachers that anyone could ever hope to have. And so I would sit down with her before every lesson my first year and just have her walk me through exactly how she was going to teach that. So I think having this culture where mentorship is something that's highly valued, and where it's highly valued as a school to constantly have people observing you and giving you feedback. Even, 5 years in, I'm asking for people to come in and give me feedback on areas that I know aren't going as well as I'd like, because that's the only way to get better. And, as teachers, we are the happiest when we feel the most successful in what we're doing. And then so I think a final piece, besides getting the right people and giving them those mentorship relationships, is I think that it's really great if a school has opportunities for kind of faculty unity. Mm-hmm. Even if we all have the same mission, I'm in one hallway of my school and it's really hard. I have so much going on. It can be hard for me to get to, an upper school Latin classroom and see what's going on there and get to know those teachers, but they have valuable insights that I could also learn from. And so our school does a lot of different things to kind of intentionally help foster community. We've had book clubs in the past for us to get to hear from each other. No matter what grade we teach, we all, are passionate about learning different things. So we've had book clubs, we've had, grammar school. We have some teachers that have taken the charge on having monthly grammar school breakfast. So we'll just bring in some different baked goods and we'll spend 20 minutes before school just being together and forming that community. And it helps make those mentorship relationships better when we know each other better. And it helps us, to really help each other live out that vision that we're trying to live.
You talked about getting the right people. What are those qualities that you might want to look for when you're identifying candidates who will make great classical education teachers?
I think that there's a couple of key things that I think from just having the opportunity to be around some really extraordinary teachers. There's a couple of common threads that I've seen across the board for all of them. And I think the first is just an excitement and a passion for learning. We talked about that phrase, community of learners. And if you tell your students how important lifelong education is, but that's not something that you actually believe in practicing, your students are going to sense that about you, and they're going to see that isn't really something that you value, and then they may not think that that's something they should value either. So, looking for people that really are eager to always continue learning, to always continue growing. That's something that I think is a really important hallmark for a classical teacher. Another one is, this one seems kind of obvious, but it's something that's so potent when you see this in a teacher, is just such a deep and true joy and care for their students. We have a lot of different students, and we're not their parents, but we become a very big part of their life for an amount of time. And we partner with parents in a very important thing in forming their children. And so it's a very serious business that we're partnering in. And so if you're someone that's going to get really kind of easily irritated or tired out by students, it's going to make it really challenging. Students are going to learn best when they know that their teacher really does care for them. Mm-hmm. Even when you have to have hard conversations with them and you need to help them grow out of some habits that are not great things that they're doing, if they know this teacher really does know me and really does care about me. So even though she's telling me to stop doing something that I really like doing, I know that there's something that she sees that's going to actually make this better for me. So, you can see those people that just really light up when they're around children, and the children can feel that too. And then a final piece, which is something I kind of just touched on, but this desire for partnering with parents. We are in their children's lives for 1 year. And while we work with character formation, we have lots of great conversations. We aren't their parents and never will be. And, the formation for children, that the primary place for that is in the parents. And so anyone who's going to be a really effective teacher needs to recognize that and needs to be really open and willing to partner with parents. And, there's lots of different ways that teachers can do that, from, having really good communication with parents, sending out newsletters, just always having constant contact and having a very open relationship for parents to come and see what's happening, bring concerns, chat with the teacher, because also, these are their babies that we're getting care of. And it's always hard for parents. You see parents cry when they drop their kids off for kindergarten, but I'm sure there's always a little bit of that feeling every year when they drop them off and see them grow. And imagine yourself as a parent and just how reassured you would be if you feel like you really do know this person that's spending 8 hours a day with your child, and know that person really does care about your child and have their best interests at heart.
You told us about this community of teachers that exists through various activities to help bring them closer together. That's good for socialization. It's good for culture. Are there specific ways that teachers also can take that a step further and learn from what they're doing in the classroom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think a kind of really big part of that is coming through these different mentorship sort of structures that schools have in place. So as a teacher, whether you're in your first year or in your 5th year or in your 20th year, there's always ways that you can improve and do something different. And if you just live autonomously in your classroom, you're never going to be able to see something other than what you're doing. I'll never forget my first year of teaching. I was so overwhelmed and I felt like I never had any time to breathe, let alone to go and take an entire class period to go and watch somebody else teach during one of my plan periods. So I think it was finally March before I took one of my plan periods and I sat in on a different grades teacher. And there were so many things that I noticed that teacher did that I was like, if I had only thought of this back in October, my life would have been so much easier. But it's something that I never would have thought of. But there's so many things that everyone does that are so great. And every teacher is going to have dozens of little nuggets. And so I think it's really important, and I mentioned this before, about having a culture in your school of constant observation. We have as a requirement that once a semester, we go and observe an upper school teacher and another grammar school teacher. And that's just as a base minimum. And every time that I do that, I come away with several things that I see that I want to implement in my classroom. And you might think that, an upper school teacher doesn't have anything to do with me. How could that possibly be helpful? But there always is something. There's something about, maybe there's a story that they're telling that ties in with the curriculum that you're teaching, and it's a cool new detail that you could add to flesh out your story. Or maybe there's a kind of writing assignment that they gave that obviously is not appropriate for your grade, but you want to do something like that with your students. There are so many things that everyone does. Your faculty are filled with so many incredible, so intelligent, such gifted teachers. And imagine what could happen if you all started pooling those great ideas together. And that's something that, Hillsdale really emphasizes by having this network of charter schools and, having all these different resources from the K-12 team to help kind of bring these ideas throughout the different schools. But even within your own school, there are so many ideas that are just ripe for the taking.
Jenny Mulvey is with us. She's a elementary teacher, science lead at Golden View Classical Academy in Golden, Colorado, and also a Hillsdale College master teacher for K-12. What does that mean? What's a master teacher in Hillsdale K-12?
Yeah, so a master teacher is a teacher throughout the network that the K-12 team has identified as having some really great ideas that would be helpful for other teachers throughout the network to share. It's almost like having that lead teacher, but instead of it being in your school, it could be in a different school. But it's kind of just someone that teachers across the country can go to whenever they have an issue if they don't already have a structure like that built into their school. So teachers from Florida could email me in Colorado about, we have this particular procedural challenge. What's some advice that you have about what you could do with that? So the K-12 team kind of built in a couple of different products that the master teachers will make and different sort of activities that they'll do to help kind of build that community and help to start sharing those ideas. So there are some Zoom calls that they'll schedule every month. There'll be a couple of them in all different areas. So teachers can join in on a Zoom call and get some ideas about a particular content area. So it could be in literacy delivery, or it could be in, history, science, and literature unit pacing. There's all sorts of different topics. And so the Hillsdale team will come up with these different topics that we can then present on. They might even just have something like almost like an office hours where you can drop in and just ask questions as they come up. Other things that we'll do is present classes at the summer conference to help, again, just kind of help teachers to learn some new ideas that would help them in their instruction. And then all of us have some other sort of more tangible products that we'll make that other teachers can use, because all of us are making lesson plans and demos and finding visuals and doing those sorts of things all the time. And so we're kind of tasked with making some of those products to make available on the online resources that the Hillsdale K-12 team manages. So I've done a lot of different science lesson plans. I've made videos of myself teaching in classes so that teachers can, it's almost like they can come and sit in on my classroom and see things that are happening. I've put together, because I have a kind of particular love of teaching science. And so with a lot of contributions from teachers across the network, I've helped to kind of put together this document called the Library of Labs, which is basically a first place that teachers can go to find some good quality hands-on science experiments and demos to do with their students, so they're not just scouring Google trying to find something to do. So there's a whole range of different things that all the different master teachers will do that's all kind of adding to this community of teachers and helping to support other teachers in areas that they need it.
What's the most frequent request you get from around the network?
I think for me, because I have a particular area in science, that they tend to be kind of science related, because including for myself, elementary teachers tend to not have science backgrounds. My majors in college were English and elementary education, and science was something that I just kind of fell into planning and just absolutely love doing. But it's something that's really hard for teachers, especially new teachers. There's a ton of outside research that we need to do, because there's a lot of concepts that we haven't studied since we were in grammar school. So it's been a minute since we've talked about them. So there's a lot of that research. There's a lot of prep that goes into any time that you would to do a hands-on demonstration. There's a lot of different materials that you need. Classroom management with that can feel really overwhelming, because you feel like you're going to hand your students all of these, wires and light bulbs and batteries, and they're going to be throwing them across the room at each other. And it just feels very daunting and overwhelming. And so a lot of the things that I talk about or get questions about have to do with, how do we find these? How do we teach this? How do I learn about this?
Jenny Mulvey is elementary school teacher and science lead at Golden View Classical Academy in Golden, Colorado, and a master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 education. Jenny, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K-12. Hillsdale_K-12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.